When talking about genre fiction, you will inevitably come across more than your fair share of genre snobs. People who want to keep to strict definitions about their most cherished storytelling tropes and who will look down at anything they consider unworthy. In the early 1940s, genre snobs attacked formulaic westerns and dubbed them horse operas. They looked with disdain at interpersonal melodramas they called soap operas. And then, a science fiction writer named Wilson Tucker, in his own bout of genre snobbery, dubbed a whole branch of science fiction as space operas. It's ironic that one of the most effete and pompous art forms, the opera, somehow got involved with denigrating genre fiction deemed too lowbrow to be worth anything, but the term stuck, to the point that nowadays, the space opera is considered a legitimate subgenre of science fiction, even among modern genre snobs. But what is a space opera? Put simply, it's a science fiction story set in space, typically with a swashbuckling hero or two, that deals in the machinations of interplanetary kingdoms at war. Think of a Shakespearean history play, but set on a giant space cruiser with aliens. Space operas on film and television are pretty common these days, with both Star Wars and Star Trek being prime examples. Of course, I just made a whole lot of people upset by saying that, but I'm sticking to my guns here. Check the comments to see good examples of those genre snobs I was talking about. However, in the early 1950s, even in the midst of the greatest science fiction boom in cinema history, the space opera wasn't really a thing. Most science fiction films in those days were low budget and literally down to earth, dealing more often than not with alien invasions or giant radioactive monsters than with space princesses and evil alien empires. The only space operas that existed were serials like Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers, or old silent films like Aelita or A Trip to Mars. But then one studio, eager to exploit big-budget spectacle in order to compete with the growing threat of television, decided the time was right to take a trip into the epic fantasy of the space opera.
Atomic scientist Dr. Cal Meacham has just received in the mail an electronic part that should not exist. His curiosity piqued, he sends for the parts to a device he doesn't even understand, an interocitor, which he then uses to communicate with Exeter, a strange man who invites him to a secluded location to bear witness to the fruits of fantastic future technology. However, once there, Dr. Meacham quickly learns that nothing is as it seems, and before long, he finds himself and his beautiful colleague, Dr. Adams, whisked away on a spacecraft to witness the harrowing conclusion to a massive interplanetary war between alien beings.
Universal Studios was a little late to the sci-fi party. Outside of Abbott and Costello tangling with the Invisible Man and going to Mars, the first real attempt by Universal to capitalize on science fiction's rise in the 1950s didn't come until It Came from Outer Space in 1953 and Creature from the Black Lagoon in 1954. Both of these were successful, but the studio still wanted to rise above the crowded field by producing a sci-fi film in full Technicolor and with a prestige budget. Enter Joseph Newman. A director primarily known for other genre films like westerns and film noirs, Newman had purchased the rights to the Raymond Jones sci-fi novel This Island Earth and was keen on making it his first foray into science fiction. He had his friend George Callahan, another science fiction virgin, write the screenplay, and then he offered the project to Universal under the provision that Newman direct it using Callahan's script. William Alland, the same man who had produced the aforementioned It Came from Outer Space and Creature from the Black Lagoon, took the reins as producer. Though Callahan's script was still used as the starting point, Alland was unhappy with it, ordering heavy rewrites by Franklin Cohen to strengthen the characters and switch up the main themes. This all happened very quickly, with the Newman deal being inked in December of 1953 and the start of principal photography taking place just a few weeks later in January of 1954. A whirlwind pre-production that highlighted how desperate Universal was to catch up to the science fiction bandwagon. The topic of today's video was voted on by my patrons. If you'd like to have a say in some of the movies I cover, want to see bonus content, or just wish to support the growth of this channel, check out my Patreon or consider becoming a channel member. I'd like to give a special shout out to my $8 androids: Batty Bat Firebrand, Chuck Poor, Diane McGill Davis, Giffen Chumley, Jack Blair, John Burrell, Mike O'Connor, Numinous 2019, Patrick Baker, Robert McGill, Sean Vale, Spoats, TB Shrumick, and Warren Davis. I sincerely couldn't do this without you guys, so thank you all. The main character, Dr. Cal Meacham, is played by an up-and-coming Rex Reason. Reason had gotten his start under the name Bart Roberts as a heavy in movies like Taza, Son of Cochise, due to his rugged looks and distinctively deep voice.
You okay?
And you?
Feel like a new toothbrush.
But to avoid being typecast that way, he had some light facial surgery and fought to keep his real name. And yes, believe it or not, Bart Roberts was fake while Rex Reason was real. To play his love interest, Dr. Ruth Adams, they cast 1950s scream queen Faith Domergue, whose other 1955 credits include Cult of the Cobra, It Came From Beneath the Sea, and Time Slip. Meanwhile, the lead alien of the film, Exeter, is played by a scene-stealing Jeff Morrow, who lobbied to have his character more fleshed out and sympathetic, and his character's boss, the brainwashing-obsessed Monitor, is played by the Thing from Another World's Douglas Spencer.
Holy cat.
Other notable actors include the Professor himself, Russell Johnson, as the ill-fated Dr. Carlson, and the multiple Patsy Award-winning Orangey, previously mentioned in my review of The Incredible Shrinking Man, as Neutron. The most recognizable and well-known character in the film, though, is the alien mutant guard, the Metaluna Mutant, but it almost wasn't included in the film, much to the detriment of future Halloween mask sales. Nearly everyone involved, from the stars to the writer and even director, thought it looked out of place and cheapened the movie. Though some sources insist that William Alland also disapproved of the mutant, it was actually Alland who fought to keep it in the movie, with the support of Universal, which knew it would be a major draw for younger audiences after a long history of putting iconic monsters in movies. The design started as a rejected concept from It Came From Outer Space, originating from the great Millicent Patrick, who altered it to fit This Island Earth's description of an insect-like creature bred for slave labor. She was fired by the head of the makeup department at the time, Bud Westmore, over petty nonsense resulting from her press tour over Creature from the Black Lagoon. To put it bluntly, Westmore allegedly didn't like that she dared to be a talented and good-looking woman who took attention away from him. With her out of the way, he then greedily took all the credit for her work, along with the works of the technicians who physically constructed the Metaluna Mutant, including Robert Hickman, Chris Mueller, and Jack Kevin. Built in a hurry due to the pre-production time crunch, they started with a bust of actress Anne Sheridan and applied layers of plastilina modeling clay, foam rubber, and fiberglass to create the bulk of the suit, which was worn by stuntman Regis Reggie Parton. The visible blood vessels on the head were planned to pulsate, but that proved too difficult to accomplish quickly. They also tried multiple different things to serve as the actual blood from the creature's wounds, things like green-dyed corn syrup and standard red stage blood, but they didn't look great in the film's vivid Technicolor. Ultimately, they settled on using ketchup, which began to rot under the stage lights. In addition to having to deal with that smell, Parton, in the suit, was also immensely overheated, with sweat accumulating in the suit's eyes and needing to be literally drained between takes. In some shots, you can still see it sloshing around. There were legs designed to go with the suit, but problems with movement forced them to be scrapped, which is why the mutant walks around in incongruously comfortable-looking slacks. This Island Earth was shot in 2 months in early 1954, mostly on Universal sound stages, but with some work done at Mount Wilson. Allen was reportedly unhappy with director Newman's work during the film's climax on Metaluna, and though no one has ever officially confirmed it, it's unanimously agreed by every source I consulted for this review that Allen brought in Jack Arnold, the director behind It Came From Outer Space and Creature from the Black Lagoon, to reshoot almost the entirety of the film's third act. Still, that was all just the beginning for the production, as it had another 16 months of post in order to finish the film's ambitious effects, supervised by David Horsley until he was replaced halfway through by Clifford Stein. With the bulk of the movie's $800,000 budget set aside for the effects, there were an incredibly high number of miniatures and mats built for the production. Out of the many models built was a model of the Earth, which then became the same Earth used in the studio's logo until the 1980s. Though the quality of the effects varies to modern eyes, these were state-of-the-art effects for the time, and This Island Earth is a critical turning point in sci-fi special effects as important and influential as Star Wars or Avatar. 1956's Forbidden Planet, for example, probably wouldn't have been greenlit if MGM weren't trying to capitalize on the highly publicized production of This Island Earth. That said, Universal wasn't satisfied with This Island Earth when it finally released in the summer of 1955, a full year and a half after it went into production. It was received relatively well by critics, but it wasn't the box office mega hit they were hoping for. It wasn't a flop, and it was a frequent half of double bills for a few years, but after This Island Earth, Universal went back to making more low-budget science fiction. Still, as I said, the film managed to inspire other big-budget sci-fi spectacles and maintained a cult following for decades. And that brings me, unfortunately, to Mystery Science Theater 3000, which used This Island Earth as the subject of its big screen debut in 1996. If I may say something my audience might find controversial, I have a love-hate relationship with MST3K. I think it's very funny when they skewer B-movies that deserve it, even B-movies I happen to love, but when they start stepping on movies that don't deserve it, movies like This Island Earth, it kind of cheapens the cultural impact of sci-fi cinema in general. If all you know of classic sci-fi is MST3K and riff tracks, you might walk away thinking all sci-fi flicks from the 50s and 60s are as ridiculous and schmaltzy as The Giant Claw, and that does a massive disservice to history. I'll get off my soapbox, but suffice it to say, I'm not a fan of the MST3K movie, specifically because it chose to make fun of This Island Earth. I don't think This Island Earth is a perfect movie by any stretch. I think the plot is a bit disjointed, the hero doesn't actually do anything, and the themes are muddled by the multiple rewrites. But it was an incredible movie in its day, a colorful tableau of dazzling effects grounded in a surprisingly intellectual story that deals with heady morality, pun intended, and science fiction concepts previously relegated solely to the written word. Even the Metaluna Mutant, as silly as it looks in motion, is an icon of cinema that stands tall beside Gilman and Karloff's Frankenstein creature, and I refuse to countenance it being used as the butt of a joke about how silly old movies can be. What I'm trying to say is that This Island Earth rises above a lot of the schlock and cheap thrills of genre fiction to be the Star Wars of its day, a space opera that demonstrated film's possibilities in ways no one had seen before. In other words, This Island Earth is, no joke, a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. Have you ever felt MST3K went too far, or should I just lighten up? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. Thank you for watching, and until next time when we'll see the big screen debut of my favorite Ankylosaurus, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love. As long as you're not hurting anybody.
Here's something my wife could use in the house. An interocitor incorporating an electron sorter.
Although she probably gained 20 pounds, well, it did all the work for her.